Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, January 6th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 240 days, the game against Michigan in 325 days. With the Buckeyes' Rose Bowl win over Utah now a few days in the past, it seemed like a good idea to take a deep dive on what went right and what went wrong in that game for Ohio State. There's only one person I would want to do that with, Buckeye Scoop's X's and O's guru, Ross Fulton. Ross, thanks for joining me.
Happy to, Tom. Thanks.
So before we get started, I did want to mention that Ohio State landed a commitment from Tanner McCalister. He was a safety for Oklahoma State this year before entering the portal. I know you probably haven't scouted him particularly closely, but can you give people some idea where he might fit on the Ohio State defense next fall?
Yeah, he plays the equivalent of Ohio State's cover safety position. So, we talked last time in depth about the three different safety positions. So he is at the spot. I would, more generally call it like a field overhang or apex. I think Knowles at Oklahoma State called it the strike position, but essentially like where Marcus Williamson and Latham Ransom played this year, closer to the line of scrimmage, over the slot receiver or between the slot receiver and the offensive tackle.
So with Marcus Williamson not coming back to the team next year, and then Latham Ransom out with that leg injury that we don't know when he's really going to be back. I mean, this seems like that might be a big addition for them from that perspective in terms of filling that hole, but also just a guy who knows the Jim Knowles defense and might be able to kind of help from that perspective too.
Yeah, I agree on both points. I find it difficult to believe that someone who started the last 2 years under Knowles would come and not start. I think that would be sort of just create a locker room issues if nothing else. So yeah, I mean, I think Knowles' scheme is not uncomplicated, and so I think it'll certainly help to have someone familiar with it. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they react. I mean, I think that Knowles is interested in getting different types of hybrid players in different spots. Similarly, like Day, I think as we talked about, he said on the conclusion of early signing day, they want basically a nickel at that spot and then a bigger hybrid. McAllister would definitely fill the nickel portion of it. I still wonder, even just with putting Latham Ransom's injury aside, still wonder whether he's a better fit maybe as a deeper free safety or field safety, like the Josh Proctor position. So they do have lots of pieces coming back defensively. So it'd be interesting to see. But yeah, I would expect to see McAllister at that field overhang spot, safety spot.
All right, so now on to the Rose Bowl. You watched that game in person. So broadly speaking, what did you think about Ohio State's play on both sides of the ball at the end of the game? And what's maybe something that has changed after getting back to, getting back home and getting a chance to rewatch it afterwards?
Yeah, well, I'll be the first to admit that, like, when I watch a game live, whether it's in person or on TV, I pick up probably a fraction of what I see rewatching it with a more analytical eye towards it. But because you do see when you're in person, particularly like close enough, you definitely get more of a feel for the personnel and the bodies, but not having the eye in the sky camera angle kind of changes things. So like, some of the different tweaks they did on defense and the like are a little bit harder to see. And I can generally tell when it's like an RPO, for example, but you pick up more of what's going on when you watch it the second time.
So we are going to just be focusing on the offense for the rest of this show. You wrote an article this week that was incredibly in-depth. I'm honestly not sure we're going to get through the whole offense on this show, but we'll have you back on to talk about the defense at some point in the next few days, next week or so. But, you pointed out something in the past that was actually very useful to me while I was shooting the game from field level, which is when they're in pistol or under center, it is far more likely to be a running play than it is when they're lined up with the back next to the quarterback. That makes it much easier for me to figure out, okay, look, expect this to be a run, expect them to hand this off, or expect them to throw the ball out of this formation. As I'm trying to find the ball behind all those bodies, that helps me out a lot. But, that didn't hold 100% true during the game. But if it made my job easier to know what might be coming, it seems like it probably made Utah's job easier as well. So how did the Utes take advantage of Ohio State's kind of tendencies in those personnel groupings?
Yeah, I've a task for any intrepid person who wants to spend some quality offseason time going back and like charting since 2019 of, Ohio State's use pistol versus offset halfback use and the run pass breakdown. Because it would be interesting because, I'm sure there's always been this tendency to some extent, but it's become pretty apparent this year. I think there's a couple things that play on it. I think part of it is TreVeyon Henderson's running style that has resulted in them wanting to be more in the pistol when he runs, as well as the use more of, with less emphasis on the read run game. But, defenses are responding. So it's very similar to what Michigan did too, where Utah was playing one high, cover one most of the time when Ohio State had the either under center in the pistol or like 2 tight ends on the field. And then they'd go to more like a cover 2 when Ohio State was offset, as just doing what you'd expect. They're expecting the one run from one formation and the pass from the other. The difference from the Michigan game was that Ohio State picked up on it and then took advantage of those tendencies themselves.
So, the first half, especially the running game, did not look great for Ohio State. So, when, how often we've talked in the past about sometimes it's just a math problem when you see that, where the defense has more defenders than they can block offensively. How often was that how often was that the issue in the run game? And then how do you get around that issue?
Yeah. So it's a complicated question because I would push back, generally speaking, on the concept that there's like some problem with the run game. Ohio State had like the number 1 SP plus offense by far this year. They probably will again next year. So, something's working right. I would say I don't think the run game was as probably particularly explosive in the second half of the season, and that included Utah. I don't know. Henderson's probably longest running against Utah was maybe 15 yards, if that. And, obviously, and then others throughout the year, there's been these few short yardage stops that everyone can think of. And so one third and one short yardage stop, as I talk about in my article, is just simply a matter of being outnumbered. Ohio State had 2 tight ends on the field, so they had 7 blockers. Utah had 8 guys in the box. There was a free linebacker sitting there in the hole. And that situation, basically, like, if you have a running back that can run that guy over for a yard, and some teams do, great. That's not really Henderson. Or you gotta throw. And they did on the 4th down play, which was, a pretty at the time pretty gutsy call. But I do think they had Utah figured out because they stayed in unbalanced, knowing that Utah would probably play cover 1 against them, and they obviously felt pretty good about their matchup with CJ Stroud. So to answer your question, I do think there's maybe a little bit of something to the 4 tackle theory. That's whatever term you want to use. It's been out there for a while. I think in particular, Paris Johnson is not well suited to play right guard as a run blocker. There's been a few defensive tackles, including for Utah, who have been really difficult for him. I think he's more of a left tackle, which is totally fine. There's, I think a lot of people want to look at the offensive line. I put more on the running backs. I personally was, when you were talking about in game versus after the game, like I personally was particularly frustrated with TreVeyon Henderson in the first half watching it live because the hole was there and he would bounce. If you have the guy blocked out that's why they kept getting holding calls, because they had people blocked out for the hole and he was running right to where the guy is, and suddenly you're grabbing because you've lost all your leverage. So I personally think that they got on him. I think they brought in Ryan Williams, and you could see he made a concerted effort to run harder and to not bounce in the second half, and that made it. They ran the ball well in the second half. The other thing about the run game that I keep harping on is with JT Barrett or Braxton Miller, they were a read run option team. So you're reading a guy, all those yards are going to count towards the run game, whether the quarterback gives it or keeps it. With CJ Stroud, they are a run pass option team. So they're doing the same concept, except now he's throwing instead of keeping it. And so those go as, quote unquote pass yards, but they come off of run plays. So like Jaxon Smith-Njigba's first touchdown was an RPO. They just over and over again, like if anything, they didn't do it enough this year because they were so wildly successful doing it whenever they did it. To me, all those come as run plays, because if they want to make the choice to put like 8 in the box and play cover 1, even if you and I don't think the Ohio State run game is good, they think it's good because they're concerned about the Ohio State run game and they don't want to get run on. So you take advantage of it. And that, to me, that's just like that's just smart football no matter what you do. Like you take what the defense is giving you. So I don't think it's like, I think there are things that can be tweaked, as I talked about. I think they need to cut down on this run pass formational issue. I think they need a little bit more run game diversity. I think they need to improve in how they block counter Trey. I think Henderson, he's still only a true freshman. I mean, I think he needs to continue to improve. And running backs can do that. And so, I think all those things add up, but if they're going to let you throw it like that, then keep throwing it.
We've talked in the past about how RPOs can put the defense in a no-win situation where, whatever they do is wrong. Where if you play the run, you throw it. If they play the pass, you run it. But Ohio State made that true in a different way, depending on whether the corners are playing up on the line or a softer coverage at the snap. So can you explain a little bit about how they did that?
Yeah, and so you could just convert those routes, and that's just a read by the quarterback and the wide receiver. So, they got a lot of soft coverage. They throw. I'm sure CJ Stroud's reading that largely pre-snap. He sees like the really soft inside leverage from the corner, and he just pulls it and throws the out. But then, the one against Smith-Njigba touchdown, the corner did try to come up, and he just converted it into a go route. And, that was a run play. I mean, the easy tell is because no one in college football follows the rule on offensive linemen downfield. So, like, when you see that Luke Whippler like 7 yards downfield, it was supposed to be an RPO. And, and so that's a 60-yard touchdown off a run play on a pass. And so anytime, again, like this is what I harped on after the Michigan game too, right? I didn't think they leaned into it enough because there's partially the scheme issue of like you have a corner, with no leverage out there, but then also like Ohio State's best players are wide receivers. So get them the ball as much as you can.
You mentioned the cover, getting Utah into cover one and, that they did stuff knowing that it was going to get Utah into cover one. That was the look they wanted to get Utah into, and then they were able to take advantage of it. So can you give us an example of what they did in order to make sure they got Utah into cover one, and then why that's something that Ohio State wanted to see and how they were able to take advantage of it?
Yeah. So I already mentioned, like, for instance, that 4th and 1 slot fade to Marvin Harrison. So they went unbalanced or put quads. So when I say unbalanced, the tight end was covered up and not an eligible receiver, which is a run specific look because you're taking away an eligible receiver. And so again, you're just counting on you're going to get, single coverage and you're going to take your shot. So it's a gutsy call, but it was like a calculated call. And so again, they increasingly, like in the second half, for instance, went under center. It was probably more under center than I've seen Ohio State do, probably since Jim Tressel. And they did that because I think so we talked about the run pass breakdown. They did increasingly throw play action out of under center. And so I think they knew, we're going to get cover one in this look, and we feel more comfortable using play action from under center than in the pistol.
All right, I wanted to touch on something that I've seen a lot of people talking about, that play where they lined up Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the backfield and then ran him on an angle route. I was looking at that. I was like, oh man, I made some hay with this exact route on NCAA 14 back in the day. But what are they trying to do there with Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the backfield and then running him out like that?
Yeah, exactly what they did do, which is, again, so they got, I think that was a cover 2 look, but you're still going to have those underneath zones. They're basically targeting the middle hole in cover 2 between the linebackers and the 2 deep safeties. And so you're going to have a linebacker carrying him vertically, absent like some sort of check by the defense to adjust to it. So that was, Stroud did a great job holding the safety by with his eyes on the opposite seam route. And, they did sort of the same thing against Michigan too. If you recall, with him on a Jabo. And so, that will continue, I'm sure, to be a part of what they're doing until defenses show that they can adjust and stop that.
All right. And then the last thing I wanted to ask, it was kind of the big question I walked away from that game with. How much of that success was stuff that they can really carry forward into the 2022 season? And how much was Utah having, injuries piling up at corner and having to play a running back at corner and things like that? How excited should people get about that game and what it might mean for next fall?
Yeah, obviously that's a factor, but they threw the ball well all year, and like there's no reason to not think that CJ Stroud's continuing to improve. With each game, and having a several weeks to sort of I guess decompress, so to speak, and sort of take stock of the season and then build from there. And I mean, those receivers are going to be good against anyone. I mean, Jaxon Smith-Njigba did it all year. Marvin Harrison is a fantastic route runner already, and it's pretty good after the catch too. So, they were the number one passing offense all year for a reason, and I don't see any reason they won't be next year as well.
Well, you can find Ross's full article. It's just called Comeback on the front page of BuckeyeScoop.com. I'll link it in the article, the article that goes along with this podcast, on the front page of Buckeye Scoop as well. And next show, we'll have Ross on again in the coming days, maybe early next week, to talk about the defense. Probably not quite as fun of a listen for Ohio State fans, but should be insightful as always. So, Ross, thank you for joining me.
Happy to, Tom.
So make sure you check out Ross's article on the front page of BuckeyeScoop.com. Again, it is just called Fulton Analysis Comeback, and you can find that at BuckeyeScoop.com, along with a ton of other great content. Kevin Noon and Mark Givler are down in San Antonio at the All-American game this week, churning out a ton of great content down there. There's the news about the new safety transfer from Oklahoma State, Tanner McCalister. That's at BuckeyeScoop.com, and much, much more. You can find that all there. You can also find Mark and Kevin are doing a daily podcast update from down at the All-American game on the Gives in the Bank feed. That was a fantastic listen on Wednesday. I'm sure it will be again on Thursday. So make sure you check that out. And you can also find it on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.